After Christopher Nolan redefined Batman and gave the world one of the most successful superhero trilogies ever, DC seemed to have everything in its corner, but instead of riding that momentum, everything that could go wrong started to go wrong. The movie that was meant to follow up Nolan's work ended up splitting the audience. Some people loved the darker take and some people absolutely hated it. That divide got worse when the director behind that vision left the studio, and when Justice League came out in a version no one seemed to like, the whole plan collapsed. What was supposed to be the beginning of a strong shared world ended up being the start of a long struggle, and DC films looked like they had hit a wall while Marvel just kept climbing higher. Marvel used that opening to dominate the box office year after year. They built an entire saga that played out like a global event, and everyone wanted to see how it would end. Meanwhile, DC could not find its footing. Every time the studio tried to launch another big team project, the response just never lined up with expectations. By 2018, the shared universe looked like it had completely fallen apart. A high-profile release that should have been a moment of triumph instead turned into a controversy that left casual fans backing away. Some of the actors who had been central to the earlier movies even said they were not coming back. At the very same time, Marvel was riding the wave of its biggest success and pulling further ahead. It left DC in a position where the studio had to decide if they were going to double down on the same mistakes or finally rethink their strategy from the ground up. As if all that was not messy enough, another drama was unfolding on the Marvel side. Old social media posts from one of their most respected filmmakers resurfaced, and the backlash was strong enough that the studio decided to let him go. This was the guy who had created the Guardians of the Galaxy and shaped the entire cosmic corner of Marvel's storytelling. He later said that even the smallest brainstorming chats he had with people often planted the seeds for ideas that became massive parts of the franchise. Losing that voice changed the way Marvel had to approach its plans and left a gap in their creative team. Everyone in the industry could feel the impact of that departure. Warner saw the opening and decided to make a move. They reached out to that same filmmaker with an offer to take over one of their cornerstone properties. They even suggested he could relaunch Superman as the foundation for a new start. On paper, that might have looked like the boldest possible choice, but the reality was more complicated. At the time, Superman was a mess of uncertainty. Nobody knew if the actor would still be in the role, and no one had a clear vision of what kind of Superman story the studio wanted to tell. Stepping into that minefield would have meant carrying the weight of every past controversy, and he wisely turned it down. Instead, he chose something that seemed less risky but also strangely perfect. He picked a project that most people would have never expected. He agreed to take on a sequel to Suicide Squad. The original movie had been a disappointment in almost every way, and the brand was in desperate need of repair. Choosing to direct its follow-up sounded crazy to some, but he knew he could breathe life into it. He had already proven that he could turn a group of oddball characters into something emotionally powerful, so the idea of doing the same with another team of misfits made sense. The plan was not to rebuild the entire universe all at once, but to make one movie that worked on its own terms. If it connected with audiences, it could remind people why these kinds of stories are fun in the first place. During development, something ironic happened. Marvel reached out to him again and offered him the chance to finish his trilogy after all. That invitation showed just how much they valued his storytelling even after the public firing. By then, though, he had already committed to the DC project and he stuck with it. That decision turned out to be one of the most important moves in superhero film history because it set the stage for everything that came after. Production was slowed down because of the pandemic, so audiences had to wait until 2021 to see what he had created. When it finally arrived, it was clear he had done something special. Critics and fans who had been burned by earlier DC films praised it as one of the best entries the studio had made in years. The movie looked wild and energetic, filled with action that felt fresh and visuals that stood out. More importantly, it leaned into the comic book roots instead of being ashamed of them. Mixed in with all the chaos were tender and human moments that made you care about characters you might have written off. He used his familiar bag of tricks like eccentric creatures, heartfelt arcs, and music sequences. But this time the studio gave him total freedom to go even further. He did not hesitate to let characters exit the story in shocking ways, and he embraced dark humor and graphic details when the story demanded them. The result was a film that stood apart from the rest of the superhero landscape. Financially, the timing hurt it. Theaters were still dealing with pandemic restrictions, and the release strategy included streaming at the same time, which cut into box office earnings. The film cost $185 million to make and only brought in $168 million. On paper, that was a loss, but everyone understood the context. The numbers did not reflect the movie's impact, which was to show that DC could still deliver something smart, bold, and entertaining. It was less about instant profits and more about repairing a broken reputation. The studio recognized that value immediately. They knew rebuilding trust was going to take time, and here was a filmmaker who had proven he could connect with fans and critics alike. His ability to take strange and often disliked characters and turn them into people you cared about made him an ideal choice for more projects. So instead of worrying only about the box office, Warner looked at the long game. If he could keep making stories like that, the brand could recover piece by piece until audiences were ready to fully invest again. His next move was to bring one of the characters from the movie into a spin-off series. Most people assumed it would flop because the character was not exactly popular, but the gamble paid off. The lead actor surprised everyone with his dramatic range, and the writers leaned into exploring the character's messy past. Instead of being a cartoonishly violent joke, the character became a layered figure struggling with family trauma and identity. The humor was still there, but it was wrapped in something much deeper. The series premiered with a tone that was even wilder than the film, and within a few episodes, people started realizing it was one of the best things DC had ever put out. Viewership grew steadily, the finale outperformed the debut, and suddenly the most unlikely character had become a fan favorite. That success hit at the same time the parent company was going through massive changes. In April of 2022, a corporate merger reshaped everything. The new chief executive wanted to fix the DC brand once and for all and created a division solely focused on it. The filmmaker was named as one of the co-leaders, sharing the top spot with an experienced executive who would handle the business side. It was a new structure that promised real unity between movies and shows, something DC had been missing for years. Once the dust settled, the filmmaker finally announced his blueprint for a new connected universe. His vision was different from the old Marvel model. Instead of giant storylines that forced you to watch every single release, he wanted smaller stories that could stand on their own but still fit into a bigger arc. That way, new viewers would not feel lost and longtime fans would still get a payoff if they followed everything. The focus was on clear writing and strong characters rather than overwhelming spectacle, and the real test for this was Superman. That was always going to be the centerpiece of the new plan, and if it failed, then all the momentum could disappear. The marketing for the movie built huge anticipation, and the first teaser spread like wildfire online. When the film finally came out, it hit the sweet spot, winning over critics and mainstream audiences alike. The box office performance was strong, proving that audiences were ready for a new take on the most iconic hero. It validated the entire approach of slowing down and focusing on quality instead of rushing toward big crossover events. That success gave the studio confidence to move forward with more films and shows. A Supergirl movie was announced, promising to expand the world while still staying character-driven. Plans for sequels teased bigger villains and larger stakes, but the careful pacing made sure each project kept its own identity. The television spin-off returned for another season, and the creative team fine-tuned it into one of the most praised DC series ever. Continuity issues were handled with reshoots and careful editing, so everything lined up without confusing the audience. In the end, the revival of DC's cinematic universe was all about trust. The filmmaker who once seemed like an outsider became the key figure in rebuilding the brand. His willingness to take risks, to tell emotional stories about strange characters, and to balance humor with heart made all the difference. The lesson was clear that though big spectacles matter, nothing matters more than the characters people believe in and stories that actually respect their intelligence. That's all for today's video. Thank you for watching till the end. What do you think about this whole DC saga? Let's know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.